Hello guys, and welcome to the Crash of Cars Fusion Card tier list. If you don't know what a tier list is, basically we have a couple of categories from F to S, F being worst and S being best, and we are going to rank some of the fusion cars in Crash of Cars and put them in their respective categories, at least in my opinion, because of course everyone has their own opinion on where every car should be. Now, I do want to make a disclaimer that these are not all of the fusion cars that are currently in Crash of Cars. So I'm pretty sure the Quantum is the last newest one, and obviously there are so many more. So we are just gonna rank the cars that we have here, and obviously that's gonna be the video. So let's start with the lowrider. So the lowrider is it's not a bad car, but in terms of special abilities, it doesn't have any. It does go up and down, and while you could, in a very rare moment, activate a boost in time to launch yourself from the ground into the air, that is a very specific scenario that I don't know if it's even worth trying. Like, you could probably make it happen, but it's just a whole thing on its own. Shortly said, this car doesn't really have too much going for it. I mean, it looks cool, but it's also kind of slow. Top speed is, I guess, decent, but it's not really good in acceleration. Handling is also not so well, which is why I'm going to put the lowrider in D. I think that's a good place to start with. Next up, we have the concept. So, this one doesn't have an ability, or at least the game doesn't say it has, but on the Crash of Cars wiki, it says that this car cannot be flipped over. And I guess I'll have to take their word for it because I've never flipped this car on its roof. But apart from that, it doesn't do anything. It is actually a bit more better. I mean, handling is better. I guess top speed is about the same. I would probably put this also in D tier. But if the lowrider kind of goes like near the bottom section of the D tier, this would be sort of like upper middle, if you understand what I'm trying to say. Next up is the Fury. And, you know, this Fury, it's all about the look. We all know what this car looks like. But in terms of abilities, there are none. And yes, I don't think there are actually any abilities. This is just a very fast car. It's not Speed 2.0 fast, but it is fast. So, I don't know. I mean, if the looks played a role, this list might look different entirely, but we're also ranking these based on their abilities and other stuff. So, I don't know. I don't think this Fury should be in C tier because C tier is, I would say, reserved for vehicles that have at least some abilities, and this has none. This merely just has specs, and for that reason alone, I'm putting this in D tier, but consider this in like upper D tier. Right, next we have the Super Super. And I think we might actually have a car going in a different tier because while this also doesn't have an ability, it slides like crazy. I mean, you can do 360s on the ground with this if you're skilled enough. Now, obviously, there is a learning curve to this car, but you know what? It's worth it. This is a fun car. It doesn't really matter if the car is all too good. If it's fun, that's good. So I'm putting this in C tier. Alright, next up is the party car. Okay, the party car. Okay, this one. So this one also doesn't have an ability, but I think it is the only vehicle alongside the War Machine and the Tipper maybe that has more than 6 bars of health. So this one has 7 bars of health. And once you destroy someone, you get to listen to some music because hey, you destroyed someone. Yay, that's pretty fun. That's pretty fun. I'm gonna put this in C tier. Just because not only does it have health, I mean, okay, looks are gonna play a bit of a role here. I mean, this car is just already wacky enough to begin with. There's the whole, there's the whole party music happening. The party music's pretty nice though. Right. Let's see. Next up, we have the banana split. And I did make a community post once asking you guys what did you think was good about this car, because I wanted to find any redeemable qualities in what I found to be the worst car according to the Crash of Cars community, at least most of you guys. And I see where you're coming from. I see where the whole criticism is coming from. This car doesn't really have all that good handling. It doesn't do anything, it just plays music, but it just plays the ice cream truck music. Not the ice cream, but the ice cream truck. I have to put that clarification there. Anyways, in terms of actually random events, one thing that happened, or not one thing, this happened multiple times to me whenever I use this car. If I teleported at a specific location, not specific, but if I like teleported to a hill or something, the wheels of the car would get stuck underground and I couldn't move unless someone took me out or did something. I don't know. And it's really unfortunate because the car has looks. I mean, who doesn't want to eat a banana split? But at this point, we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on performance and abilities. This one has decent top speed. That's what a lot of you guys said on my community post. But apart from that, this car doesn't really have anything else. So yeah, I guess this is gonna have to go in F tier. Now let's move on to the mini tank. I know this one. I know this one is a very polarizing one. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because a lot of guys either really like this car. I mean, everyone uses it. But on the other hand, a lot of guys also don't like this car because everyone uses it. I mean, yeah, I see why people are liking this car and why people don't. But if you ask me, I would say this is actually a very great car. In fact, this is perhaps one of the best cars in the entire game. Hear me out. Hear me out, okay? Hear me out. This car has like the same ability as the tank, but it's small, it's fast, it handles really well. And I think all of those are reasons enough to consider this as a great car. Like anyone who's used a mini tank knows how great this car is. And let's not forget, a car wouldn't be this good if everyone was using it. Now, a lot of people might say, well, maybe they should nerf this car. But I don't see what's there to nerf. The mini tank, I think, has to go in S tier. I mean, there's no other car like it. And hey, look, you might dislike me for this, but this is my list, this is my opinion. You can make your own list if you want to. I'll put the link to the website in the description. You can find this. And you can place this in F tier if that's what you want, if that's what you think this car is. But I'm ranking this based on performance. And yeah, the ability probably isn't as special, but it's a good ability. And everything else just speaks for itself. Next up is the Grand Valachi, and again, I think this one is a bit of a no-brainer. I'm thinking the Grand Valachi also goes in the S tier. I mean, think about it. It's the fastest car. It has, well, if you take out the shields, it has more health than the speed, so they have 4 bars of health. This one has 6. And it handles just a bit differently than the speeds. But I still think this is an amazing car. A lot of people use this one. So, I mean, it's understandable why. It is one of the fastest cars. Yeah, this one also goes in S tier, for sure. Next up, we have the helicopter. And the helicopter was one of those cars that actually got buffed about 2 years ago. And while the buff did improve, this car like now can be 8 seconds on water. I still find the handling a bit troubling. It slides a bit too much for me. And also, it doesn't climb the same like the monster bus or the monster truck. It has the same ability, but it doesn't handle slopes and hills the same way those cars do. So, for that reason, I'm thinking this car or in this case, this vehicle, I would actually put it in B tier. But consider it like low section B tier. Like I said, the handling is a bit troubling, but that still doesn't take away the fact that this can go on water and climb hills, and I've actually found many places where that is very useful. So there are some maps where this car, why do I keep saying car? This vehicle absolutely crushes it. But in some places, I would be a bit more wary of where I use it, like where I try to climb up a steep hill or something. So yeah, this is gonna go in B tier. I still think it has so many good abilities to be above these two here. Right, next up is the Vampire. And the Vampire was also buffed. And one of the things about the Vampire, it's sort of, that I think you guys should know is you'll lose health over time. And what that does is it forces you to play aggressively, where you have to actively seek out players, hit them so that you can regain some health, which forces you to play in an aggressive way, which is something I don't think everyone wants to do. And that is why the Vampire, if you're playing defensively, is not that good of an option. You'll have to heal up after a certain period of time. Now, to be fair, they did buff it so that you don't have to heal up ever so often. But, I mean, it is still something that happens. And that is why I think the Vampire, I mean, there's also the top speed. It's decent. The handling is not so good, and the acceleration, not good as well. This is probably going to go in E tier. But like, I would probably say like top level E tier. I wouldn't put it in D tier. Yeah, it has an ability, but you have to play aggressively. That's how I'll explain it. Next up is the War Machine. In this one, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, yeah, it's really slow. It does have the most health bars out of any car in the game. And it also bashes opponents on all four sides, which I find very useful in many cases. But being the slowest car, anyone can catch up to you. And if they're careful enough, they can just trail you with a flamethrower. And unless you like stop and reverse or something. But I would say this car, I would probably put this in D tier. But like really, really top D tier. Next up is the Plasma Bike. I see people using it, but not a lot of people. But those who do use it, they actually use it really well. So, I guess the only problem I have with this bike is the trail it leaves. If you drive over it, you take damage yourself, which I guess probably would be a no-brainer moment, but I don't know. You make that trail and you take damage, but then again, I don't know. It still won't affect my opinion too much. I'm going to put this in C tier. But again, like top C tier. I just think the trail hitting you is what can kind of ruin a moment. Like if you're in a tight spot, you can mess up your game or something. Alright, next up is the Bomb Bot. And the Bomb Bot is what I would consider a car that's had a very bad fortune. This car didn't get buffed, so you pick up a landmine, and when you hit someone, the landmine radius not only is so small, but the actual damage you deal is not that big. And it's just what probably makes this car so unpopular. People don't use this because it doesn't really have too many good use cases. Yeah, you can deal damage with the landmine somehow, but it has to be a specific scenario where you don't push the other car too far or something. And they never buffed this one. If you drive over a landmine and you've already collected one, you take damage. I'm only mentioning this because I think if they remove that, that could probably be a considerable enough of a buff for me to put it in C tier, but I'm probably going to leave this one in D tier. Next up is the Baboosh car. And the Baboosh car is not a bad car. It changes sizes, it changes shapes, but one thing I should mention about that is the smaller you are, the faster you get. So if you're being chased and you heal up in the middle of a chase, you'll be slowed down, and whoever's chasing you will catch up deal you damage again, and you'll be back in a small size. So this one has a few specific scenarios you might need to adapt to, but other than that, this is a pretty solid car. I'm actually gonna put it in C tier. Yeah, and there are also many different like sub variants of the cars. Like there's a sliding small like the smallest car, not the tri-bike, the smallest car. There's like one that a variant of it that slides a lot and one that doesn't. So yeah, keep that in mind. But this one's going to C tier. Next up is the bomber plane, and I really like the bomber plane. Might I say it's actually I don't know if they even buffed it. I don't think it needs any buffing. It doesn't do as much damage with the bombs it drops, but you can deal a lot of damage. And when it's on the ground, it's actually very fast and agile. So I'm actually going to put this one in B tier. It's right up there with the helicopter. I think that's a great place to put this at. Right, next up is the Inferno. And this one, I think this one is also, just like the Bomba, a very unfortunate car. It didn't get buffed. And to activate it, you need to like knock down 5 trees, so you need to be playing either in a tree specific map or drive over 2 drops of oil. And here's how they can buff this car. When you're driving over oil, you still slip, you still can't control your car, but the flame activates itself upon the second slip of oil you drive over. And that is like a few seconds of that flamethrower that's already a bit too short being wasted. If they want to buff this, the second time you drive over an oil spill, they should remove the inability to control this car. They should make it so you can just find someone. And maybe they should even increase the top speed once you've activated the flamethrower. Yeah, that's definitely something that they should do. But as it stands, I'm not really going to give this any more than a D tier. Next up is the monster bus. I think this one would come after the Inferno. So the monster bus, I would say, is probably just a lesser version of the monster truck, because the distance between the front and the rear wheels being larger here makes it a bit tougher to climb hills. In the monster truck, the regular one, I think it can climb hills easier. But this is still not a bad car. I mean, it obviously does a lot. Climbing hill, that's something everyone would want. And it actually has decent handling and decent top speed. So I might actually put this one in C tier. I think C tier is a good place to put this car in. Right, next up is the train. And the train, this can actually be a really powerful car. Or, again, vehicle. If you have a very straight spot and you activate the full speed mode, you deal a lot of damage to opponents. Now, it is very bad at handling, so keep that in mind. But I'm thinking the train is gonna go in C tier. Yeah. It has a very strong point, but also that handling is a bit of what takes away from the whole fun of it. So yeah, I'm gonna put this in C. Right, next up is the speedboat. And this one has the ability to just drive over water, like the hovercraft, but it actually is way faster. But the handling is worse. It slides a lot. You can barely like make good turns with this. I'm thinking the speedboat is probably gonna go in C tier. Yeah, I think C tier is a good place to put this in. Right, next up we have the Dutchman. And the Dutchman is incredibly good. Teleportation in water and double cannons on both sides. Do I have to go further? This is an A tier. It's not S tier because it still doesn't have the handling of the S tier cars, and it's kind of slow in acceleration. So I'm gonna put this one in A tier. It can be very powerful in specific scenarios, but I still think it's way better than many of the other cars we saw. And finally, we have the Quantum. I know this isn't the last, like, of all fusion cars, but this is the last one we have for today. The Quantum, it looks, I mean, nothing looks like this. And while the ability doesn't help too much in terms of like actually taking out opponents, I find the whole crown collecting thing a really good thing because you can also get coins faster because you can just collect more crowns at once in a certain radius. And also it has incredibly good handling. Yes, incredibly good handling. So I'm thinking this Quantum is gonna finish our video in B tier. And with that, we have completed the Crash of Cars Fusion card tier list. What do you guys think about this list? Do you agree or not? Write in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.